esteemed Professor of Earth Science, Dean, Science and Technology, University of Mysore, Professor Basarajappa sir, President of Institute of Legal Studies and Policy Research, Syed Kudrat, Professor Banu, Professor of Computer Science, St. Joseph University, Bangalore, Professor Daniel Hamilton Fernandes de Lima, Professor of Law, Brazil, Sri Venugopal Padov, Professor, Associate Director, International Affairs, former Director, ICCR, Bangalore, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Invitees, students, researchers, scholars, academicians, above ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed privileged and honored to be a part of this International Model United Nations Conference 2024, which is being held on Conference of Parties 2030. Of course, which will be held in a couple of years before that. So understanding COP is really inevitable for us to understand the developments that were taken place, especially in 1992. In 1992, in fact, two main conventions concluded among the nations. International Convention on Biological Diversity, 1992, and UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change, 1992. These are the offshoots of UN mandates. Everybody knows it's not an exaggeration. Understanding climate change is inevitable for us now due to industrialization, liberalization, privatization, and the globalization as well. When you just look into the efforts made by UNO in this regard, is really inevitable. Look into the preamble itself. It does say, we the people of United Nations determined to save the succeeding generation from the scourge of war. War was inevitable in earlier days. To overcome war among the nations, you could establish an organizational setup at the international level as such, none other than United Nations. In 1947, in fact, GATT was initiated. GATT was actually giving more importance to developed countries rather than developing countries. And it was highly expressive with a view to support the so-called nations, none other than big brothers or big powers and such other thing. To overcome all these issues and challenges, in 1960 and 1970, there was an awareness among these developing countries through which new international economic order was initiated. Through new international economic order, as many as steps were concluded at the international level with a view to give more importance to understand the protection and preservation of our human environment. That is our concern. In 1972, in fact, Stockholm Conference took place among the nations. They include Agenda 21 on sustainable development. Protection and preservation of human environment is a matter of acceptability and the survival of our social system. That has to be acknowledged. When there is a right to development, obviously, protection of human environment shall also be actually looked upon. Right to wholesome environment is part of our life. This is what Article 21 of the Constitution of India has already been made clear, based on the efforts made at the international level as such. Here, what I would like to share with you, both disciplines like public international law and the municipal law, they should be balanced when you are looking forward with the protection and preservation of the human environment as well. Of course, no matter in this conference, you will be dealing with as many as issues and challenges. Take for example, it could be on green economy, smart city planning, the impact of artificial intelligence, intellectual property rights, sustainable development, the international investment treaty provisions. All in all, we will be dealing, no matter however it could be. But the fact that the moment when you are understanding the classical issues between right to development, which was widespread through a new international economic order in 1970, declaration on right to development came in. Later on, new millennium goals came in 2000. Based on earlier history of mankind, in 2015, you could find, sustainable development goals, which are highly inevitable for us to develop ourselves soon after these crises as well. Keeping any of these developmental activities at the international level, we should acknowledge the efforts made by United Nations and its half-century enactments. We are sitting here to acknowledge half-century enactments as well. When you just look into the perceptions of UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change 1992, this convention was actually giving more importance to understand the common concern of humanity, common but differentiated responsibility, precautionary principles, intergenerational equity, sustainable development, common heritage of mankind, and optimal utilization of natural resources. The basis to understand UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change 1992 as such. In Rio de Janeiro Declaration, these were the conclusions took place among the nations. Take for example, Convention on Biological Diversity 1992 and UNFCCC. These are the offshoots of earlier history of mankind. Please understand what had happened in 1972. In 1972, the Stockholm Declaration came out with many approaches to understand our own surrounding circumstances. Our own surrounding circumstances should be protected. That's our concern. Obligations are shouldered on you. That's the dharma you have. One owes a duty towards others. One owes a duty towards others in the sense that you have to accustom to the custom of the nature. Otherwise, nature will take retaliation and reprisal against a human being as such. So keeping in view of all these observations, I'm just asking all the participants to look into the matter very seriously to understand the world crisis as well. When you just look into UNFCCC, it has got 26 articles followed by many things like it has got objectives, principles, then look into the subjective and objective approaches based on education, training, the public awareness. See, when you are dealing with climate change, there shall be an education should be given to the lowest strata. This is one thing, and you have to give awareness programs like seminars, conference, symposiums, or workshops through which you can understand our own surrounding circumstances as well. This is one thing. When it comes to the knowledge of the developmental activities through science and technology, science is one. Science means humanity. Technology means humanity. Look into earlier history, how Archimedes, Louis Pasteur, then Sir Isaac Newton, Aristotle, and Copernicus. They have contributed a lot to shape the entire world as such. That's one of the major aspects which shall also be actually looked upon. Science, technology, law, and the society, they should go hand in hand. Any crisis between these, you have to face a lot of issues and challenges as well. Keeping in view of all these examples, even in India, you could be able to pass as many as legislations to understand our own surrounding circumstances. We have a National Environment Policy 2006. Apart from these policies, you have Article 21 that can be interpreted. Article 21 that itself is a primordial right, without which other rights cannot be enjoyable. Right to life, which includes right to wholesome environment. So that's our concern to protect our own environment. Look into the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and the climate change. They have been actually keep working on the climate change as well. Apart from this, you have a Central Pollution Control Board, State Pollution Control Board. You have National Green Tribunal, which was established in 2010. So along with the continuity of these efforts made by central and state governments, you have as many as legislations which are actually dealing with the protection and preservation of the human environment as none other than Air Act, Water Act, then Environmental Protection Act 1986. These are the legislations have been brought in on the basis of efforts made at the international level as such. That has to be looked into. This is one thing. I must say with you, when you are actually dealing with these issues and challenges, you have to have a look on public international law and the constitutional law as well. Both should be balanced. Otherwise, it would be virtually impossible to understand the word crisis as well. This is one thing. Usually, this is our experience. States sign the records and they will never ever go for ratification. But as far as Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties 1969 is concerned, when you have become a member country of any convention, that's your duty to ratify international covenants are concerned. So through which you can understand the international law as well. This is one thing. On the other hand, as it has been well noticed under Article 7 of the UNFCCC, under Article 7 of UNFCCC, we are talking on the conference of parties. Every year, we have been actually meeting the needs of the people to understand their own the issues and challenges as such. The first COP was actually concluded in Germany, later on in Switzerland, Japan, in Kyoto, then Delhi in India, then in Nairobi, Kenya. The next COP will be held in Brazil. So before you are going to have all these deliberations at a higher level, so understanding the COP is really appreciated, the way in which you are projecting yourself. So based on conference parties shall also be actually looked upon. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand the humanity on the global stage. So there are many causes of climate change. Everybody knows this is not an exaggeration to state. What are the causes of climate change and what are the effects of climate change shall also be actually addressed in this conference as such. You know very well, better than me, there are as many as causes of climate change. Take for an example, generating power, then manufacturing goods, cutting down forest, using transportation, producing food, then power building, consuming too much are the major causes of the climate change as such. You should have some limitations as long as you're a human being. That's one of the major aspects shall also be actually looked upon. Then what are its effects? That's also to be addressed in this conference as such. See, look into hotter temperature in these days. It's very difficult to sleep at home because of hotter temperature. That it should be known. And more severe storms, increased drought, then global warming, rising of sea level, the loss of a species, and more health risk, poverty, displacement are the major risk of the climate change as such. You know, the fact that as many as people have been actually fleeing from one place to another place because of these reasons are concerned. Tomorrow, you'll be finding a lot of internally displaced persons are concerned. See, who are responsible to overcome the internal displacement as well? This is very serious issue around the globe. People have been actually migrating from one place to another place. Of course, no matter, human migration is inherent. You cannot stop it. Have a cup of tea in international airport, Bangalore, you'll be known how many Indians are actually migrating to other countries, how many foreigners are entering India. Unimaginable proportions of human migration is there because of the climate change as such. Therefore, you need to have uh, some uh, conflict resolutions. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand the climate changes as well. Keeping view of all these observations, whenever you want to go for addressing these issues at the international level, we shall not be forgotten on certain basic principles as stated under the public international law as such, none other than pacta sunt servanda, just cogens, and the rebus sic stantibus. So these are the basis with a view to understand the world crisis as well. And that has to be looked on the basis of sources of public international law, which is actually well noticed under Article 38, paragraph 1 of ICJ Charter 1946 as well. This is one thing I would like to state before this August Assembly. Okay, apart from these world crisis, we have, as many as climate change issues. According to a report conducted by UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, urgent action is needed to avoid the catastrophic effects of global warming. Without change, the world's coral reefs could be completely eradicated, and we could see an increase in widespread flooding, extreme heat, drought, and the poverty as well. Of course, this is one of the goals of Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 30. How exactly these goals are highly helpful to the member countries, especially the developing countries. It's very difficult to address these issues in nutshell because of several reasons. When you are close to high temperature, high fertility will come. When you have got high fertility, population will be increased. When you have got population, the problems are plenty all over the world. Why I'm just sharing all these examples? No matter. There are three, centric approaches available around the globe. Take for example, you have Eurocentric approach, US-centric approach, Asia-Afro-centric approaches are concerned. When you are addressing these approaches, obviously the problems in developing countries are highly vulnerable because they're close to high temperature. Exceptions might be there. However, a few countries are close to high temperature. When you have got, all these issues and challenges, you cannot keep quiet and you have to resolve the matter on time. That's one of the major aspects shall also be actually looked upon when you are dealing with the UNFCCC as such. As long as you are dealing with UNFCCC, you shall not be forgotten on some issues and challenges as well. Take for example, greenhouse gas levels are at an all-time high. There are more greenhouse gases in atmosphere than ever before, and that is causing the Earth's temperature to rise. The burning of fossil fuel, emissions from transport, and the environmental impact of intensive farming have all contributed to high levels of CO2 in our atmosphere. And scientists say this is the fastest and largest increase in CO2 the world has ever seen as such. More than 1 million species face extinction as such. While the expected rate of a species extinction is usually around 5 species a year, we are currently losing up to 10,000 times the normal rate. This means that dozens of species go extinct every single day as such. Tomorrow, whatever you are witnessing, some animals, maybe in your museum as such. So therefore, you have to understand the endangered species as well. The climate change is increasingly creating some problems to refugee crisis has. Why? People have been actually migrating from one place to another place because of a climate change as such. You have to think about these crises as well. Obviously, they will claim violation of human rights at the international level as such. This is what UN Charter 1945 is very clear about the protection and preservation of uh, the human environment. Along with that, it urges that there shall be international cooperation and mutual coexistence with a view to promote, increase human rights and fundamental freedoms without distinction of the race, sex, and the language as such. So, keeping in view of these observations, even our oceans are also under crisis. Our planet is only as healthy as its oceans, and the UN has warned that marine life faces irreparable damage from millions of tons of plastic waste that ends up in the oceans every year as such. Then who's this responsibility? You can put a fundamental question. The entire civil society is responsible to pay for it. So that's one of the major aspects should be observed in this uh, uh, the conference as such. Otherwise, it would be meaningless, as I believe. So, keeping you of these observations, explore yourself on all the basic principles of the environmental law. Take an example. It could be on a polluter pays principle. Have a look on sustainable development, common but differentiated responsibility, precautionary principles, common heritage of mankind, common concern of humanity. Look into these two main conventions: Convention on Biological Diversity and UN Framework on Climate Change 1992. They have outspoken on common concern of humanity. It does not mean that common heritage of mankind is dead. Common heritage of mankind is a part and parcel of these two main conventions that has to be addressed according to the time as such. With these few aspects, I take this opportunity to thank each one of you for giving me an opportunity to share few aspects in connection to the model United Nations.